Hi, everybody. I hope I'm finding you well, happy, and enjoying the summer. I think in Australia, are you guys in your winter? Whatever season it is, I hope you're able to kind of just embrace that. But yeah, welcome to your Friday deep dive. I'm really honored to fill in to the amazing shoes of Bon. And yeah, cheers. I got my little cup of tea and ready to go today. So yeah, I hope that you found some of the sessions that I've been leading. I'm engaging a few little golden nuggets in there. And as always, I'm always kind of we're offering you this giant buffet, right? So some of the techniques, like you'll go, yeah, that one's for me. Some of them you'll go, oh, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll have a go of that. But yeah, see if you can find something, maybe in every talk, to support you, but also just a reminder that every time we go through theory, it allows your brain and your body to have words, and a connection with words to how you're feeling. And that starts to rewire things for you. We're starting to work on that like cognitive rewiring just by sitting and listening into some language that actually helps us make sense of our feelings, our emotions, and our overall experiences. So well done on logging in, on being part of the journey and choosing you for your healing. I think that it's really great. And I think that the bravest thing that a person can do is seek any support and growth. I think sometimes in our lives it's easier to just stay stuck, like we talked about in my last session. Being stuck and getting stuck is sometimes a safety net, and that's very understandable. But well done you for kind of moving out of that safety net and choosing, growth, choosing sometimes to lean into new things, in order to, yeah, find a different viewpoint. And that brings us to today's topic. We're looking at kind of this like, how do we continue to shift our thinking? And we want to today reframe negative beliefs after trauma. How do we reframe the way that we think? Because our structure, our brain, it's already started to form these neurological pathways and these kind of belief systems that we start to see the world through. And last time, I think it was on our Well-Being Wednesday, I popped on my sunglasses because I always like to use this. It reminds me every time when I put them on in this kind of talk that I'm seeing the world through my own self-beliefs. And those beliefs obviously have been written based on past trauma, past like the good things, but that the heavy weighted things start to create these real negative thoughts about ourselves. And sometimes if we're not conscious of it, then we're not able to even notice it and work through it. We just kind of living. Sometimes I call it the zombie effect. We're like just moving without any sort of guidance, and there's no change. We're kind of feeling that Eeyore effect, that ho hum, from Winnie the Pooh. So today I want us to understand negative self-beliefs, the origins of these beliefs, and how our past traumatic experiences can kind of shape those self-perceptions. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words. Shape self-perceptions. So we're gonna kind of look a little bit at these cognitive, thinking about the brain, those distortions, and which are inaccurate thoughts, right? That reinforce a negative belief. And often, when we're talking about a negative belief, anything that doesn't make us feel worthy or enough, that is a negative feeling that we're kind of seeing the world through. And so all of these negative beliefs, these things we are maybe quietly subconsciously believing in ourselves, then that projects outwards, and it creates different dynamics of like people pleasing or low self-esteem. And if we can tackle those beliefs, we can notice them, we can begin to work through them, we can start to rewire. It's wild neuroplasticity. We can rewire our brain potentially to start feeling like you are enough, you are worthy of these things. And one past event or past traumas or whatever it is that our trauma is that we're here to work on, that does not define us. That does not define the way that the world perceives us, that we are worthy of great things, despite our brain telling us that we're not. So let's understand a little bit of these things and we'll look for some strategies to kind of move through that. Yeah, I'm a bit excited about it because when I first learned about negative self-beliefs, I actually found it like really game changing personally. I started to recognize that my little negative talk, my self talk, if I were to be a fly on the wall in my brain sometimes, like there's a real sense of an imposter syndrome coming out in there. And the imposter syndrome, I mean, I always like to change it. The word syndrome often makes me feel like there's like it's an illness, but every human being has this like voice, an imposter experience. There's a little imposter in our brain that often jumps in and tells us that like we're not good enough. I don't know if you've ever felt it, in most jobs that I took on as an adult, sometimes I still feel it like somebody's telling me like someone's going to find out you have no idea what you're doing. But actually you do know what you're doing because you're doing it. But my brain is constantly telling me sometimes that like, hey, that wasn't very good. You have to rethink that. You need to change that. You stumbled on your words at the beginning. What's going to happen from that? You need to be perfect. And what I'm trying to tell you is that some of those thoughts are normal because we're human. The imposter syndrome, that little voice, is normal in the human experience, but it's heightened often with an additional kind of louder voice and these limited beliefs, these belief systems that we start to see the world through because of traumatic experiences. It just becomes a little more ingrained in us. So negative self-beliefs are deeply ingrained perceptions about ourselves that often arise from a past experience, especially traumatic ones. These beliefs can significantly impact on our thoughts. Then that kind of triggers our emotions. We're feeling lots of emotions sometimes in moments that we're like, why am I feeling with this, like all of this stuff in this moment? It also then in turn impacts on our behaviors and our overall well-being, right? Our confidence, our ability to be resilient. One small knock, it's the end of the world, And I definitely can, like, I can tell you that I'm that person who sometimes digs into that shame. And actually, there's no reason to, if you were to talk to me, be like, someone, if you were my best mate, you'd be like, why are you even bothered by that? So to embark on a journey of reframing these beliefs, it's really crucial for us to delve into their origins, understand the role of kind of the cognitive distortions. And when we think of a distortion, I think of something, it's a little bit warped. It's not the truth, is it? The truth is, you are enough just as you are. Our past doesn't shape our future. The only moment we have is present moment. There's so many things in mindfulness that suggest that we just leave the past in the past, live for the now, deep breathing, But if we can recognize some of the most common negative beliefs we'll look at through today, then hopefully we can kind of begin to move through them. And it really does take time. I often refer to it, I think, in one of our last videos when we were talking about negative thinking. I talked about this idea that when you go for a walk through the woods, I don't know about you, but I genuinely like to take the beaten down path. Sometimes I like to veer off, my children like to explore a little bit, but my brain is telling me that it's not that safe to go kind of off that path. I want to go where people are going. I want to stay safe. I don't, growing up in Canada, I don't want to be somewhere where there's bears or whatever. I mean, I want to stay safe. And that's what happens with our brain, that beaten down pathway, that neurological pathway, those synapses they're called that have been created. That is our easiest route. We feel safe sometimes in negative thinking. That is what our body is used to thinking. It feels like a safe space. And they say like it does take a long time for us to shift that brain kind of pattern and those habits, but we can absolutely do it. So yeah, past traumatic experience, especially those involving emotional, physical, or psychological harm, right? They can really leave a lasting imprint on our self-perceptions, our belief, the way that we look at ourselves. And trauma can shatter our sense of safety and trust, leading to feeling sometimes being like powerless. You kind of feel like, you don't have that confidence to, step into what you want, or sometimes there's like people pleasing element, always looking for that reassurance. It leaves us vulnerable. So these experiences can just create these negative self beliefs, and inaccurate thinking, that can kind of like be self-depreciating, that kind of element of like you thought of your self-esteem, we're kind of chipping away, and we need to kind of build ourselves back up, find the truth. Um, so an example might be this. I think back to like a person who might have experienced childhood abuse. They might develop a belief that they are not lovable or deserving, or they are deserving of mistreatment. They feel like, well, I deserved that. And that's actually something very common. Someone maybe who survived a toxic relationship, maybe there's like some subconscious belief in there. They may internalize the belief that they're responsible at some point for that abuse. It was my fault. Negative self beliefs act as a defense sometimes mechanism to help us try to understand and navigate through trauma, but they often sometimes do more harm in the long run. So it's okay if we feel this way, but we do need to unpack it so that we can find ourselves again in all of it and stop blaming ourselves for things that actually aren't our fault. And one of my favorite lines in any sort of film, my favorite film is I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called Good Will Hunting. It's a old Robin Williams film, Matt Damon. But he sits there in this room with Matt Damon, and he looks at him, a young man who's gone through so much trauma, and he just keeps repeating like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And I feel like it's one of the most powerful moments in television, in any film. It still gives me goosebumps. I love that moment so much because it just resonates so much that we beat ourselves up. We think, well, there's surely got to be a part of me, or surely there's got to be something that's true about me if this were to happen to me. But actually, that is not a truth at all. It is just negative self thinking. And it's something that the brain does to try and make sense of what happened. We need genuinely to start letting go a little bit of that. So let's see. Can you recognize maybe yourself, or a past self in any of these sort of, we call it a cognitive distortion. So these are kind of four of the more common ones. So I want you to ask yourself, is maybe this your pattern of thinking at all? It could be all the time. It could be sometimes, maybe in the past, maybe you've been working on this. But these are four of the sort of common cognitive distortions that come from those who are working through rebuilding their thoughts, post trauma. One is black and white thinking. And I used to personally be this. I used to say I was always an extremist. I was like really, really like everything was really, really good, really, really perfect. Or like in the whole, I'm a failure, I'm not worthy. Like there was very little middle ground. I remember recognizing that in many of my coaching sessions earlier on. It was either really, really great or really, really low. There was like very little middle. And my goal was to try and bridge that gap and find some level of like, balance, and finding that the lows didn't dip so low, but still really enjoying the positives. But black and white thinking, do you have that in you maybe all the time, or in some scenarios, or scenarios that are triggering? It's just interesting to think like maybe that's like something that you can resonate with. Another one is catastrophizing, sorry. And that is very common. My sister-in-law, we would honestly speak openly, and we would say that she might sometimes catastrophize. She would like assume the worst possible outcome. So if I make a mistake, my life will be ruined. Everything feels so heavy and overwhelming. It just feels like, there's no middle ground as well. Like it, whatever it is, it could be like, oh, I've got like this spot on my face. It's got to be cancer, catastrophizing. And that's not necessarily just worrying, but maybe it's this thought process and ruminating, going over and over these thoughts. And it's all these big thoughts that feel like the world is ending. Everything's going to be ruined. Everything's not going to be okay. And that might even also be something so simple. I can recognize in myself, I I remember trying to bake a cake for my son's birthday one year, and I genuinely ended up in tears because I actually don't know what happened, but the cake didn't work out. I didn't have time to go get anything. It was late at night, you're rushing around. And I remember thinking like I'm the world's worst mother. I'm the world's worst mother. That's a big statement, isn't it? And I genuinely just felt like low, and I ended up like my husband was like, Megan, it honestly, it's going to be okay if you buy a cake and just decorate it the way you want it. Or if you want me to support, we can go and get something tomorrow. He's not going to know. He's not going to care. I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't know. My association was like, that had to happen. I was catastrophizing. He's going to have the worst birthday. It's a cake. But my brain was thinking that this was like the worst thing that I could do. And if you look at that, that seems like a simple scenario, but sometimes our brains do that again based on past experiences, and recognizing it, sometimes talking it out, having somebody, a friend that can actually support you in potentially like reframing those conversations, those decisions. It's just something that I think it's important to recognize. So is catastrophizing one of those things for you? Just gonna sneeze. Excuse me. Um, Perfect. So my next one is personalization. Um, and personalization is believing that everything is your fault, even if it's absolutely not. You might have had a breakup in a relationship. That is all my fault. That's kind of the one of the other kind of distortions. And then the last one, I mean, there's others, but I'm just going to stick to four of them today. See if you can recognize yourself. Overgeneralizations are another kind of phrase, and that's just applying a negative experience to all aspects of life. Um, and I want you to think about the example here, like I failed this task, so I'm a failure in general. Yeah, so it's just thinking in that sort of way. I'm a failure in general. I failed this task. Over generalization. So overall, just like not feeling enough. And I think that that's really important. And so when we break down what we mean by a negative self-belief, sometimes it's just something simple like one phrase. We talk about affirmations. I don't know if you recognize an affirmation is a positive phrase, isn't it? But a negative affirmation is a negative self-belief. And so many of us are sitting in these negative self-beliefs. For example, I am unworthy. That's one when you feel like I am inherently undeserving of respect, of love, of happiness due to my past experiences. Sometimes there's this sense of like we want to sabotage anything that feels good. So yeah, it's the next one might be like I am to blame. So I am to blame, believing that one is responsible for trauma they've experienced, even if it was beyond their control. So we're maybe talking about a situation maybe that happened, and maybe somebody's blaming themselves because they had had a few drinks and then they weren't thinking clearly, so they didn't. It's partly their fault. In the eyes of the law, that's not right. There is no blame. It's not your fault. It's coming back to that same phrase. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. But our brains sometimes catastrophize or create these negative self-beliefs. And they start to shape our whole identity. This idea like I am not enough is the biggest one. Marissa Peer is a really big speaker on well-being. She's a great coach as well, but she hinges her entire business on the thought that most people have some negative thought or negative belief that they are not enough as they are, whether it's physically, maybe they're inadequate, incapable of meeting others, not good enough to the person next to them, often stemming from experiences of criticism or rejection. And I think it's really important to kind of recognize in that it's normal if you feel that way. And feeling that sense of not enough is something that we can correct, and we can also recognize it. There's it is what it is. I genuinely can recognize, like, as a person, that I have sat in those shoes many times, and I'm still trying to find within me, like, I am enough as the person I am, in the body that I am in the position that I am financially, in what I'm offering my family. It's so easy to get like stuck in like this crazy world and feeling like we're not enough based on trauma, based on comparison. And we do need to get back to the root that, like, you are a good person and you have a kind heart. you know it's not our fault. We are enough and we are worthy. We are not to blame. And there's another phrase, like, we talked a lot about, like, feeling unsafe, and feeling unsafe is a really common, like, negative self-belief. And sometimes we are totally safe. Sometimes we feel like we're in full fight or flight mode, just walking into an appointment, walking into a social event, something like that. And it's super important that we take a little moment to recognize, like, we'll go through some of our grounding activities. You can go back to the butterfly tab. You can do some deep breathing, some of the work from your modules, but recognizing in that moment, actually, the truth is, maybe you are feeling overwhelmed. Maybe we are in a place of fight or flight, but there is no bear, there's no saber-toothed tiger jumping out at us. Actually, if we found a mindful, grateful moment, there's four walls around us. There's a roof over our head. We've got the safety network of this group. There's a lot of positive things in our lives. We've got a place to lean in if we need support. We are safe. But carrying a constant sense of, like, danger, threat due to past traumatic events, that is like hypervigilance. And that's where we often live from a place of anxiety. And again, that is, maybe if that's you, maybe your limiting belief today might be, I'm feeling unsafe. Or maybe it's like, I am broken, viewing oneself as like irreparable. This happened to me and I cannot be fixed. This has ruined my life forever. I mean, so many people I know that that's a place at which they feel, and for them that feels really true. But science suggests that you can change that mindset. You can find this, like, work, the neuroplasticity, and you can work your way through it in towards healing and recovering. You are not broken. And if we can start to change that narrative from, like, I am broken to, I am not broken, I am worthy. These things take a while. It sounds cheesy, but negative self-beliefs, we can absolutely work towards changing the entire structure of our brain, changing. It's like walking another pathway, like we said, through the woods. We need to carve another pathway, a much more positive one, and maybe leave that beaten down path as an old path that's just leading to the same destination. But we want to go find that beautiful new, like, we didn't know existed in behind. Imagine that's the route that we're trying to pave right now through these positive experiences. So understanding these negative beliefs, their origins, this is kind of where these thoughts stem from. I want you to take a little moment now. I just want you to maybe stop the recording in a moment, and I want you to ask yourself, like, if you resonate with anything we've talked about so far, in the sense of, are you a black and white thinker? Do you catastrophize? Can you recognize that? And within that, can you think a little bit about any of the negative phrases or the negative beliefs that maybe you have taken on? Is it, I'm unworthy, I'm to blame, I'm not enough, I'm unsafe, I am broken? I want you to just reflect and take a moment. Maybe, a little note of, like, where does it come from? Maybe why you might feel that way. Maybe you feel a variety of ways. And, how did it start? How did I continue to refine my recipe of negative self-belief? What do I need to change to stop this process? What is the opposite phrase we need to get to? So I want you to reflect and think, like, okay, if I've written down that I feel unsafe or I am broken, I want you to recognize that we need to move through that, and maybe recognize that, like, I need to move towards this other destination. So you can even come back to one of my techniques from the last session. I love to bring those things in. But if we had that stick person, if you're not somebody who likes to kind of write lots of writing, maybe you can put your stick person now maybe what your negative self-belief is, or draw a bubble of your brain. And then we want to draw another one, possibly, or another stick person of your final destination. I'm worthy, I am able, I am confident, I am enough, I am not broken, I am safe. I am worthy of love, I'm worthy of respect, I'm worthy of happiness and good things. So just take a little moment to kind of see if anything we've talked about, you're able to resonate it and get it on paper. And sometimes I don't know about you, if there is anybody who engages in sort of any mindfulness, mindful coloring. Sometimes like coloring in the images, it's quite nice to recognize the negative self-thinking, what colors represent that, and maybe the positive ones, like where is your final destination? So you can see, it's almost like we're plugging in our sat nav of our brain. In our module, when I talk about the reticular activating system, it's actually located at the back. We're trying to find a new filter for our brain. We start to let the positive thoughts in and stop letting all of the negative ones in, because that has become our comfort zone. All right. So if I'm still talking and you want to write, pause, take a breather, take a moment, and just see if you can kind of maybe make sense of like where you might see yourself in some of this theory. Lovely. And I just think that that's a nice little task is this me in any way? Is there a past me that might be looking at this? And if you can identify it, you can work through it. If you can find, I think it's so powerful, because when I finally had language that made me make sense of me, that's when I kind of thought, hey, like I am just being human. And being human, I think, is the most refreshing thing that you can really remember in all of this. Like, you've not done anything wrong in feeling these ways. These negative beliefs are not anything that we're working through them. I think a lot of people work through them, or maybe never work through them. I think the power of knowing just gives you that power back and starts to build, instead of that sense of chipping away. We're starting to rebuild. We're starting to set new layers and a new foundation to build up our sense of confidence and resilience and our ability to just enjoy the world around us, and to see its beauty, and to think, hey, like I deserve to be in this moment. I deserve this beautiful holiday. I deserve this really kind person in my life instead of pushing them away. I deserve this. And I'm worthy of this, and I'm enough in this relationship without having to be or act or pretend. I'm worthy of this person, and I'm enough, with feelings of anxiety. All of it is good. All of it is okay. All of this is good. All of your learning just helps you become better in all aspects of your life. So amazing. I've got a few techniques to help us. Again, we've kind of started on that route, but a few techniques to help us reframe our thoughts. So it's often called cognitive reframing. And that's like a powerful technique that empowers like individuals to challenge, shift thought patterns that stem from past trauma. And kind of engaging in this process, participants, people who are kind of taking this in, get a deeper understanding of your beliefs. You'll be able to identify more of the origins. The more that we get to the root of it, the more that we can go, hey, that's where it came from. That means I can work on it. That means it's in my past, that root. And then we can hopefully replace it with a more balanced, realistic thought. Sometimes it's this happened, this is what I learned from it, and this is how I've grown, and celebrate the growth. We need to like repackage it, that file in your brain. I also like to, I once read, and I loved this metaphor that the brain is often likened to a computer, right? And if you imagine that you have this file, maybe that file is like one trauma, in particular, one specific event. Maybe I don't know everybody's stories, but whatever that might have one event be, imagine it's like a file, and the file like colored a dark color, and it's written over as like the worst thing that could ever happen. And in that file, full of those negative self-beliefs. What we almost have to do is reopen that file, and we need to clean it up. We need to color the file a different color, that's something more happy and bright. Not that it was a happy and bright moment, but we have to find the learning in it. We need to reframe it. We need to shift it. We need to get rid of the things that aren't true. And then that file still sits with us in our brain, but we hopefully have renamed it and shifted the way that we look at that, the perception of it, and I'll not allow it to shape how we move through and in a negative thinking pattern as we kind of walk through the rest of our lives in each chapter and each relationship. So cognitive reframing is about examining, altering the way that we kind of interpret and respond to situations, thoughts, and our emotions. And it's like looking at a painting from a different angle to discover kind of new details and perspectives, similar to what I'd said about that file. And by engaging in this kind of cognitive reframing, individuals can break free. So we can all break free, hopefully, from the grip that these negative self-beliefs and hold on us and develop kind of healthier, more constructive thought patterns. That's the goal. So steps in reframing, the first one, you can grab a pen if you want, if not, come back and listen to it in future. But one is like what we've already done, really identify the negative belief. If you don't know how to name it, you can color it, you can brainstorm it, but you start by identifying the negative belief that you want to reframe. And you can come back if you're not sure. This is a great topic to have in one of your coaching sessions with Bon. Maybe you can say like, hey, I'm really interested in some of the negative self-beliefs. These are the things that like resonated with me in the conversation. Can you help me break this down further? I often find talking therapy very helpful in finding these, digging a little deeper and finding a way through them. So an example might just be, you might have resonated a lot with the phrase like, I am unworthy. Then the next is we explore evidence. And again, you can do this in a coaching session or on your own. So once you've identified that negative belief, take a closer look at the evidence that supports and contradicts it. So I almost want you to take like, I love this idea of having this like piece of paper, we fold it in half, and maybe right on this side supports and on the other side contradict. And I want you to imagine that you're a fly on the wall. So this situation is not yours. This situation, this feeling and emotion or this limiting belief of being unworthy, what you're doing is what supports it. Can you think of anything there that actually shows that you are genuinely unworthy? You can write anything down, go for it. You know, think about that's your best friend going through, they think they're unworthy. What supports that they're unworthy? Can you think of anything? And on the other side of it, can you think of anything that contradicts it? Anything on that side, anything on that sheet, anything at all that's actually, well, you do support family, you do show lots of care, you know are great to other people, you're a helper, you're dedicated, you're loyal, you're whatever it is. There's so many great things that you can think about. Imagine like, again, if it's not, if you're struggling with just you, maybe think of it as like a best friend and what contradicts it. And I bet you if you start looking at those two lists, it starts to like show your reality. I bet you really struggle more than you think to find what actually supports that. It's just a habit of thinking. So again, looking at that, there's a few questions to support with those lists. Maybe what experiences have contributed to this belief? Are there any instances that challenge or contradict your belief? How has this belief impacted on your thoughts and emotions and actions? Can you just dig a little deeper into that? But I love the contradicts and supports because I feel like there's this incredible aha moment. I do it with myself personally. I find this really helpful because sometimes it's very hard to tell myself, like, that's not true about you. It's not true that you're not good enough. You know, just because something wasn't like in the eyes of, you know, I think I've shared quite openly, my perfectionism is something that I am very deeply working on the whole of my life. There's this, you know, if I can be perfect, then, you know, everything that I've been through doesn't matter because, you know, I will dedicate the rest of my life to being great. And but that also lives with some self-belief of like, there might be like still like a little bit of like, it was my fault. But, you know, it's not your fault. We need to come back and flip that. Okay. And that brings me to the next one. We need to generate alternative thoughts. I call it the flip method. Sometimes I have it in front of me here to show you. For the men in the group, you might not use a hairband. You might want to use just like an elastic band. Maybe you've got a bracelet. I know my husband has like some like really manly bracelets. Just like whatever they are, you might have that. Or you might just use it like a plastic, not a plastic, but like just a normal elastic band. And sometimes, like, I like to have that on my wrist. And when I'm thinking negatively, when I notice that something is coming up, I'll take it and I'll move it to my other wrist. And I think, like, I'm going to flip that thought. So I'm sat here, I'm beating myself up about something that I did that wasn't perfect, the birthday cake scenario, really like shaming myself. I am in a deep spiral of shame over not making my son's birthday cake, right? But then I need to go, no, Megan, I like to take a deep breath. It helps me reset the whole of my body. Let's flip that thought. You are caring. You are just trying to make a birthday cake for your son. You wanted it to be homemade because you love him and you wanted to show an effort. But the reality is he's only two. Nobody cares but you, and he's going to have a birthday cake no matter whether you made it or not, and it's okay. Take a deep breath. You are still a good mother. Flip my script. My script in that moment is I'm a terrible, the world's worst mother. You're still a good mother. You're a caring person. That's my truth in that moment. And I think that that's really powerful. So it's this idea of like flipping, it's the flip method. We reframe the negative belief. So you might go, I am unworthy, and you just flip it. Maybe you write it down like, actually, I am very worthy. I have inherent worth, and my value is not determined by my past experiences. And I'm sure that you probably maybe overheard this analogy, but I love it anyway. So I'm going to repeat it. If you take, there's a 20-pound note. If I took that and I crumpled it up in front of all of you, and I just threw it on the ground, I stepped on it, I stamped on it, I rolled it all up, you know, it's just gone for it, been through the mill. And I said, I'm sure none of you are going to want that, but I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure every single one of you would think, but Megan, that's like still 20 pounds. That has worth. I can go buy something with 20 pounds in this day and age. Like every little bit helps, right? Grab the 20 pounds and you just open it up, you flatten it out, you'd iron it out. It still might have like a little bit of its like indents, or it might not look the same, but it still has that worth. It's still worth 20 pounds. And our worth should not be determined by our past stories at all. It just absolutely isn't. You're still just as worthy. You just have some warrior wounds. And I like a warrior wound. We often hear it about like, somebody who's gone to war, but a warrior wound can be emotional as well. These stories that we worked so hard to change. We found so many amazing techniques, and then we were able to shift our thinking and help other people because we helped ourselves. Maybe we can flip that script. I am, I hold value, I help others, I am safe, I am kind, I am worthy, I am enough. We flip that script. Do the flip method. Okay. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable saying kind things. I get that. I actually am that person, but it doesn't mean that you have to believe it straight away. You're not going to after like years and years. You ask yourself, how long? Like, how long has it taken you to build up these negative distortions? Like, how long? I mean, for some of us, we're rooting back to like the early, like memory. It's like ages we don't even know. Sometimes it's an adult life, whatever the experience is that has disrupted, our self perception. It's not going to change overnight. But the more that you start reading it, the more we start saying it, the more we start looking at flipping into positive affirmations, the more we start to be able to shift our thinking, like genuinely. The more you read it, you write it down, have quotes in the back of your phone or whatever it is. The more that you start reading it, the more you start thinking like that's a phrase that's going to start repeating in your mind. And the more our brain is going to start through that reticular activating system, it's going to start allowing some of those thoughts to make their way through as we carve that new pathway, to that other beautiful part of the woods we didn't know existed. Let's go find it. Let's go find that little extra happy, sunny space. And moving out of that kind of negative thinking. So yeah, the flip method is your next bit. And then the next one is kind of a step. We kind of just, it's simply just challenge the thinking. So it's about kind of similar to what we had done with our list, our catastrophizing list as such. This step involves pinpointing and addressing the distortion. Okay, that might be amplifying that negative belief. So if you are catastrophizing, so we're thinking about a little bit of like those distortions. If you or you're engaging in black and white thinking, so going back to those four we talked about, challenge that distortion by seeking evidence on the contrary and adopting like more of a fresh perspective. And what I mean by that is sit down with it and be like, hey, am I in one of my four? Am I in a black and white thinking, catastrophizing, personalization, or overgeneralization? You can come back to those definitions if you need to. But if you're there, maybe just sitting like and saying, okay, if this was my best friend, can I just recognize that I'm in that thought process? This is what I'm doing. And that is like my little like ding, ding, ding. I am, in a series of negative self-thought, negative self-talk. I'm somewhere living in a negative self-belief. And that's just you being like, okay, let's just bring that down now. Let's take a deep breath and let's kind of see if we can work through this, write it down, whatever. I do think just challenge it. Be like, hey, do I have to be thinking that way? Is it really that bad? That sort of stuff. Am I just in this pattern? Sometimes that's all it takes, sorry, is for you to go, okay, I'm catastrophizing right now and sit with this. Megan, we don't need to be doing that. That's a negative self-belief. Like it sounds so simple, but having that language and that vocabulary now can sometimes center you and balance you and bring you back to a more real or back to reality in terms of, thinking more positively and seeing the world as it is instead of through those goggles or those glasses. And finally, which I do think is that, something we can work on for the whole of our lives. Many of us dip in and out, but the next last piece of this is really to practice self-compassion. And as you kind of work through reframing processes, really remember self-compassion, be kind to yourself, be kind, acknowledge, that it is okay if you struggle with negative self-beliefs. I think, it's a journey for us through our entire life. It's something, especially if you've experienced trauma. And there's also many of us, like, there's many people who haven't experienced any deep trauma, but still are working through negative self-talk. We have to treat ourselves with the same empathy, kindness, and understanding that you would offer your best friend, your children, whatever it is, those people that you love and adore. That's we talk about self-love. It's not necessarily, yeah, anything icky. I feel like it's this lovey-dovey feeling, I talk to my husband about self-love. Sometimes I don't want self-love. Like, no, it just kind of means just being good to yourself, just if you need some space, you need some space. If you need to just say, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed at the minute, I'd like to talk it out. Great. Maybe it is, you just need to take some deep breathing or take a walk, or, if you can rearrange your schedule in the morning and just, find a nice routine to begin your day, whatever it is, like practice that space, take care of yourself. And I think that the biggest bit as well, like, it is all about repeating these processes. Repeat, repeat, repeat. You've created these processes, like we said, and it's, many of it come from like credible sources. Some of our negative thinking comes from like maybe parents who didn't quite understand the impact they were having, other family members, close friends. And now we can recognize that our self-beliefs, like those are not good for us. Maybe those people knew that they were, maybe most people don't know that they're making that impact on us, but, life happens and we need to kind of find our way through that. And so if that's something that we believed for a long time, then go easy. I think when we look at research, Bon and I have spoken about how it takes like a good 6 months as a good aim. That's quite a while. But continuing on this journey, you will start to find a shift. It's not as easy as, okay, I'm going to think positively. I'm going to do the mind flip. And then all of a sudden, like, poof, my neural pathways are changed, my synapses are grown. We need to continue on this journey. And sometimes I like personally dip back into the not good enough vibes, but then I come back and I try and before bed like recite in my head like, I am enough, I am worthy, I am kind. And I take a few deep breaths as I close my eyes if my mind is ruminating, catastrophizing, whatever it is. Sometimes I can be very black and white. I think like when I think about with my husband, I'm like, no, it's over now. We're not having a party. It happens. Like there's patterns that are hard to break, but I can pull myself out. I can now find the light through the trees, and I can find a solution and work through that, and still enjoy my son's birthday, not just like sat there beating myself up in shame. So, I am enough, whether, the cake is not what my idea was. And that's like a simple analogy to apply to some of the heavier, bigger things in life. So, yeah, cultivate some self compassion, some positive talk. Having a conversation with yourself sounds silly, but actually, this is in fact like healthy. Start talking to yourself, start talking about positive options. And that is reframing. Sometimes I argue with myself, which sounds crazy, but I'm like sat there all the time being like, no, 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 Megan, that is enough time catastrophizing. That that's not reality. That's an outlandish way to take that on. That is a habit that you used to have. And sometimes you come back to, you can kind of pull yourself back. Let's get back into the reality. But also, it is nice to have a safe person to say, hey, I'm in one of these realms, help me out. And my safe person, I'm very lucky that I have a healthy relationship with my husband. You might have a friend or a sister or a brother, or if not, these are the conversations you can like bring up with Bond in your coaching. It's awesome. So yeah. Overall, maybe practice some like self-kindness. Just choose you. It's this, I'm sure you've seen that another theory of like the oxygen mask on the airplane. You put it on yourself so you can breathe, and then you can be the best version of yourself for others in all other aspects of your life. So just keep on this journey, keep taking in the oxygen, keep being kind to yourself. Stop beating yourself up. And if you ever have setbacks, just say like, hey, I'm being human, but I'm working, I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. We're reframing our thinking instead of like, indulging in that negative self-talk. And yeah, I think that's it. So some of the benefits of all of this stuff: self-compassion, self-talk, recognizing, going through the patterns above, doing the reframing, knowing the theory, it can lead to this like a little bit more empowerment. You can kind of make your way through those feelings, and you can also empower others by sharing those positive affirmations. It builds some resilience because you now have tools. You have a way to start going, okay, I feel this way because, and I can work on it in this way. And I'm going to start rebuilding my thinking, and I'm working on my synapses, and I know that by sitting here with my flipping my thoughts, challenging my thoughts, I'm working towards, that desired state that I'm after, whatever it is. We start to reduce the negative thinking too, which is amazing. It actually does. It actually works. Positive self-talk, it starts to really challenge, and you'll start to have that conversation when the negative thoughts creep up. After a while, you'd be like, actually, that's not true. And then sometimes your body starts to move on before you get into deep rumination, deep overthinking and spiraling. So that's great. And overall, we use the term healing. You're on like a healing journey, and that's like, healing for me is just like self-acceptance, finding some sort of peace from the turmoil that you've been feeling, just like, feeling like you're growing, and that you're able to tackle the tough stuff and enjoy the world around you. And sometimes it just deeply improves your relationships, communication, promotes healthier boundaries, self-worth, all of it. The more we know about ourselves, the more that we can grow and be, in this world, just feeling good. And that's what we want, right? We want this space at which when adversity comes, we can tackle it. We don't dip so low. Maybe we're not in such a black and white space that we can tackle it with a little bit more clarity and not letting these, negative beliefs totally overwhelm how we see the world and how we see ourselves. So remember, you are enough just as you are in every way. What you're bringing in every aspect of your life is enough. Just turn up, do your best. Your best is all anybody asks for. You are enough. You are worthy. It's not your fault. You are not broken. You are growing. You are not unsafe. You are safe. You are not inadequate. In fact, you are more than adequate. You bring value to this world. You are not unlovable. You're unique, and that's your superpower. You have power rather than being powerless. You're absolutely not a burden. You are loved, and you deserve the support that you need. So there's all these feelings that come to mind. And maybe a suggestion for you, maybe you're a little, I don't know whether it's a home learning or whatever, but maybe just sit with it and see if any of these come up for you. Maybe if any of the negative self-talk, if anything resonates, maybe say this might be a really good topic to break down, challenge with Bon, or if my favorite is that little piece of paper and asking yourself the truth of it, what actually supports this, and what's the truth. So anyways, that is us. That is time. That is, honestly, I hope that you have found a little bit of inspiration here. I hope you are able to just kind of take on this idea that we can reframe our thinking, that we can find that peace that we're after, and that practicing some self-compassion and working through that understanding can make a really big difference. So anyways, as per usual, I'm just going to make a little note that I think I've said in a few others. Over time, as my kids get older, I'll be a bit more here on a live aspect. So I apologize, I'm not here for lots of conversation and live coaching. But I have small children, and at the moment I'm home with them quite a bit. So I'm gonna obviously this is posted via YouTube onto the link which you can use. And if there's any questions, you're not sure of anything, I would love for you to write any comments. I will be checking it throughout the day, but specifically I'll be online at 10:15, the usual time for the talk. If you're watching it and you think, oh, I want to ask that, I'll stay on a little bit longer after. I'll keep dipping in and out. It's just, I couldn't do a focused presentation of this information, give you my all with my little boy running around, So he's got, just to carry on with my metaphor, his birthday is in a few weeks' time. I'm going to try another cake. And if not, the goal is to not catastrophize for his third birthday. But remember, it's normal. And even if it keeps coming up, it is, the more we learn about it, the easier it is to kind of find that resilience to burst out of those habits. So yeah, you've got this. Peace and love, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you next month for the Wellbeing Wednesday. Who knows, maybe I'll get to do a few of Bon's deep dives. I really genuinely love having this time and space to share this knowledge and be with you on your journey. So thanks so much and take care.